What if the person you trusted most held the secret that could destroy your entire life? This story begins not with triumph, but with loss. A woman once respected, stripped of everything in a single night, left to wander with nothing but the memory of a father's promise and the bitterness of betrayal. What happens when she knocks on the door of the only man her father believed she could trust? And what if behind that door lies not salvation, but a truth darker than the lies that ruined her life? Stay with us until the very end of this story, because every choice, every hidden word, and every shadow in that house will matter. Do you believe second chances exist, or are they just illusions people cling to when there's nothing left? Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel, leave a like to support this work, and in the comments tell us from which city you are watching. And now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. The afternoon heat pressed down like a punishment that refused to end. Air moved thick as syrup, carrying the sound of traffic and voices that faded as quickly as they rose. On a splintered bench at the bus stop, Nia Carter sat with a single canvas bag at her feet. Inside the bag were all the things she still owned. A folded photo of her father, a lanyard from the hospital where she once worked, a toothbrush, and the letter she had read so many times the paper had worn soft at the edges. She unfolded it again, tracing the name written in her father's shaky hand. Mr. Deshaun Brooks, his friend, his final piece of advice, his last hope for her. She whispered the name as if testing its weight. The sound vanished in the heavy air. Her throat was dry, but her mind was sharp. She told herself the truth she repeated each morning. You can break or you can stand. She chose to stand even if her body wanted to collapse. A man waiting near the stop glanced at her bag and then at her face. His expression carried the kind of judgment she had learned to expect. Nia forced herself to meet his stare until he looked away. A woman in a bright dress walked past and asked casually if Nia was waiting for someone. Nia answered without hesitation. Waiting for the bus. The woman smiled politely, but Nia caught the curiosity in her eyes. She had no time to explain her life to strangers. Her phone showed 2 o'clock. She still had an hour before the meeting time on the note, but her nerves beat louder with each minute. She pulled out the old lanyard, its plastic badge still faintly bearing her name. She remembered the smell of disinfectant in the corridors, the rhythm of machines, the sound of patients calling her voice steady and kind. That world had disappeared the day she was accused of making a mistake she never made. One meeting, one sentence, one closed door, and everything was gone. She touched the photograph of her father and heard his voice in her memory. If it ever gets too hard, baby, you go see Deshaun. He'll know what to do. It had been his last voicemail. Every time she listened, the grief came back sharp, so she carried the words in silence. They were the only reason she was still here, in this heat, with a bus about to arrive. When the vehicle pulled up with a groan, she stepped inside, paid with her last bill, and found a seat by the window. The air inside was hardly cooler, but at least the hum of the engine drowned her thoughts. A boy across the aisle watched her for a moment. She smiled faintly, and he turned away, embarrassed. Nia rehearsed what she would say. Mr. Brooks, I came because my father asked me to. I need work. I can care for your father. Simple, steady, respectful. She had no strength for begging. She had skills, and she wanted only a chance to use them. She repeated the line silently, pressing her hand against the bag as if the objects inside could remind her she still existed. When the bus hissed at her stop, she stepped down into sunlight sharper than before. The street here looked different. Cleaner sidewalks, trimmed hedges, houses where curtains fell perfectly even. Nia smoothed her shirt with both palms, as if neatness could hide exhaustion. Her phone showed 2:45. She bought a bottle of water from a vendor nearby, drained it in long gulps, and kept walking. By the time she reached the iron gate, her pulse raced. Beyond the trees stood the wide outline of the Brooks house. Her father had described it once, but hearing and seeing were not the same. She placed her bag on the ground for a moment, wiped her palms on her jeans, and pressed the intercom. A crackle answered, then a voice asked her business. Nia leaned close and said clearly, I'm here to see Mr. Deshaun Brooks. My father sent me. The gate was silent for a moment, as if the house itself were deciding her fate. Then the lock clicked, and the metal began to slide open. Nia picked up her bag and stepped forward. She had no idea what kind of welcome waited on the other side, but she knew this much. The moment she crossed that threshold, her life would no longer be the same, and deep inside that house a secret waited that none of them were ready to face. The iron gate closed behind her with a sound that echoed heavier than it should. The long path toward the Brooks residence curved between rows of trees trimmed with precision, their shadows offering brief relief from the heat. Nia's shoes sank slightly into the gravel, her bag tugging at her shoulder. Every step carried the sharp reminder of where she had come from, streets that smelled of dust and sweat, and where she now stood, on land where even silence felt expensive. The house rose ahead, wide and bright, its windows gleaming like mirrors. She hesitated at the bottom of the marble steps, her reflection caught faintly in the glass doors. For a moment she almost turned back, but her father's words pressed in, "If it gets bad, go to Deshawn." So she lifted her chin, adjusted the strap on her bag, and knocked. The door opened not to Deshawn himself, but to a man in a neat uniform, his expression professional, almost blank. He looked her over before asking why she had come. Nia answered evenly, "My name is Nia Carter. I'm here to see Mr. Rueda Brooks. My father was his friend." The man studied her face a moment longer, then stepped aside. She entered into cool air that smelled faintly of polished wood and flowers she couldn't name. The contrast struck hard. While she had slept on benches and carried water bottles that turned warm within minutes, here the walls themselves breathed luxury. A chandelier threw patterns across a wide hallway. Thick rugs muted her steps. She clutched her bag tighter, as though someone might judge it unworthy of the space it occupied. Moments later, the man led her into a study lined with bookshelves and leather chairs. There, Deshawn Brooks rose from behind a desk. Time had carved lines into his face, but his presence filled the room with authority. His suit was dark, his tie neatly placed, his eyes sharp with calculation. He spoke first. "You must be Nia. Your father mentioned you before he passed." His voice carried a weight both kind and cautious. Nia swallowed, pulled the letter from her bag, and stepped closer. "He asked me to bring this to you. He said I could trust you." Her hand trembled slightly as she placed the worn envelope on the desk. Deshawn looked at it for a long moment before opening it. His eyes moved over the words slowly, deliberately. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapping the letter against his palm. "Your father was a good man. I owe him more than I can ever repay." She waited, heart pounding. For days she had carried the hope that this moment would not end with polite dismissal. Deshawn finally met her gaze. "I know what happened to you. I've heard the story that went around. I don't believe it. But I also know the world doesn't forgive easily." He paused, then added, "What are you looking for, Nia?" Her answer came steady, rehearsed but honest. "Work. I can care for those who need it. My hands are steady, my training is real. I need the chance to prove it again." Deshawn studied her as if weighing not only her words, but the strength behind them. After a silence that stretched too long, he nodded once. "My father is ill. He needs someone patient, someone who can manage his moods. It isn't easy. If you're willing, the job is yours." Relief washed over her like cool rain. She nodded quickly. "I can do it. I won't let you regret it." Deshawn's lips curved into the hint of a smile. "We'll see. Start tomorrow morning. The staff will show you where to stay. Rest tonight, because once you step into his room, you'll see why most don't last long." Nia bowed her head slightly, gratitude and nerves colliding in her chest. She whispered almost to herself, "Thank you." As she followed the servant out of the study, her steps felt lighter, but her mind raced. She had been given a chance, just as her father promised. Yet she couldn't ignore the weight in Deshawn's final words. Most don't last long. What exactly waited for her behind the door of an old man's room? Morning light spilled across the long hallways of the Brooks house as Nia followed the servant toward a wing that smelled faintly of medicine and old fabric. Each step echoed against the polished floor, and with every sound her nerves sharpened. Today she would face the man whose approval could decide whether she belonged here or not. Elder James Brooks, the father of Deshawn, the patient she was meant to care for. The servant stopped before a heavy door and gave her a look that carried more warning than welcome. "He doesn't like strangers," the man murmured. "Don't take his words to heart." With that, he knocked gently, opened the door, and gestured for Nia to step inside. The room was dim except for the sunlight cutting through half-drawn curtains. Elder James sat in a wide chair near the window, a blanket across his knees, his frame thinner than the stories had suggested. His eyes, though clouded with age, were sharp as blades, and the cane resting at his side seemed less a support than a weapon ready to be used. He looked at Nia for only a second before grunting. "So, this is the girl my son dragged in." His voice rasped with disuse but still carried authority. Nia steadied her voice. "My name is Nia Carter. I'll be helping with your care." The old man scoffed. "Helping? You mean hovering? Another nurse who'll pretend to listen and then talk about me behind closed doors. How long before you run off? A week? 2? Her jaw tightened, but she kept her tone calm. "I don't plan on running. I came here to work, and I don't speak behind people's backs. If I have something to say, I'll say it where you can hear me." That made him glance at her again, this time with a flicker of surprise. He shifted the blanket irritably. Bold words are cheap. Can you even hold a steady hand when mine shakes so much I can't lift a cup? She stepped closer, picked up the glass from the Vibton's side table, and poured fresh water from the pitcher. Kneeling slightly, she guided the cup to his lips, steady as stone. He drank slowly, testing her patience with every pause. When he finished, she set the glass back down without spilling a drop. James leaned back, narrowing his eyes. You didn't flinch. Most do." Nia allowed herself a thin smile. "My father used to say, if you flinch, you lose trust. I don't intend to lose yours." The old man chuckled dryly, though it sounded closer to a cough. "Your father. I remember him. A stubborn man, but honest. Maybe you carry more of him than I expected." For a moment the room softened, but it ended quickly when he jabbed his cane against the floor. "Don't think I'll make it easy. I don't like people fussing over me, and I don't like pity. You'll do what's needed, and nothing more." Nia met his stare evenly. "That works for me. I'm here to help you live your days with dignity, not to make speeches about it." His lips curved into something between irritation and reluctant respect. "You've got a sharp tongue for someone who came begging. Maybe you'll last longer than the others." She inclined her head slightly, hiding the small spark of pride she felt. Winning his respect would not be simple, but in that exchange she had caught the faintest glimpse of it. As she stepped back toward the door, his voice followed her. "We'll see if you're as strong on the bad days, because they're coming." Nia left the room with her pulse steady but her mind racing. The job was hers, but the real challenge had only just begun. The dining room glowed with warm light from a chandelier that seemed to float above the long-polished table. Silverware gleamed, glasses caught reflections, and bowls of food gave off scents rich enough to make Nia's stomach tighten. It had been weeks since she had sat at a table that looked like this, yet the comfort it promised felt fragile, as though the air itself warned her not to relax. At the far end of the table, Deshaun sat with calm authority, his hands resting near a glass of wine he hadn't touched. Elder James remained in his chair, blanket over his knees, grumbling whenever someone tried to adjust it. Beside him, Aunt Lorraine presided with an expression sharp enough to cut through silence. Her dress was immaculate, her jewellery modest but deliberate, and her eyes fixed on Nia the way one studies an unwelcome guest. Nia had been invited as a courtesy, yet she felt the invitation carried an unspoken test. She placed her hands carefully in her lap, reminded herself of her father's advice. "Don't ask for pity, ask for space to prove yourself," and lifted her chin. The meal began with small exchanges. Deshaun asked about household schedules, staff duties, business matters. Nia listened quietly, answering only when he directed a question her way. Aunt Lorraine interrupted often, her tone dripping with disapproval masked as civility. "So, you're the new helper," Lorraine remarked, her fork poised but untouched. "Another one? They don't seem to last very long here." Nia replied evenly, "I plan to stay as long as I'm needed." The older woman's lips tightened. "We'll see. This house has a way of testing people." Elder James let out a raspy chuckle. "She's tougher than she looks, Lorraine. Already put me in my place this morning." His words carried a hint of reluctant admiration. Deshaun glanced at his aunt, then at Nia, a shadow of a smile flickering across his face. "She has spirit. That's why she's here." The air thickened, the clinking of silverware suddenly loud. Lorraine set down her fork with deliberate grace. "Spirit is one thing. Knowing where you don't belong is another." Nia felt the jab but refused to flinch. "I belong where I can do good. That's all I want." The tension might have sharpened further, But it shifted when Lorraine spoke again, her voice quieter but edged with something else. Of course none of this would matter if Evelyn was still here. The name cut through the room like a blade. Deshawn's hand stilled on the table. Elder James lowered his eyes. The silence that followed was thick with memories unspoken. Nia caught the weight of it immediately. She had heard no mention of Evelyn before, yet the reaction told her everything. Whoever she had been, her absence was an open wound. Deshawn finally broke the silence. That's enough, Aunt. We don't need to bring her into this tonight. His tone was calm but final. Lorraine pressed her lips together and leaned back, but her eyes never left Nia. She should know the truth if she's going to stay in this house. Elder James muttered, almost to himself. The girl had fire. Too much sometimes. Deshawn's jaw tightened. She died. That's all there is to say, but Nia could see it. The way his gaze slid from the table, the way Lorraine's eyes glimmered with something closer to bitterness than grief, the way James tapped his cane against the floor as if trying to drown out memories. Their words gave a story, but their faces whispered another. She said nothing, only lowered her eyes politely and lifted her glass of water. Yet in her mind, a question burned. What really happened to Evelyn Brooks? That night, long after the dining room had emptied and silence spread through the Brooks house, Nia sat on the narrow bed that had been prepared for her in the guest quarters. The sheets were fresh, the air cooler than she was used to, yet sleep refused to come. The name Evelyn circled in her mind, heavy and persistent. She had not asked questions at dinner, but the look into Sean's eyes told her the story of Evelyn's death was one he did not want examined. Nia pressed her palms against her temples, trying to calm the unease. She remembered another night, months before, when her life had already been unravelling. She had been working a temporary shift in a psychiatric clinic, assigned to cover for a sick nurse. The ward was quiet except for the occasional outburst from behind locked doors. That was where she had seen her. The memory rose so vividly now it felt like yesterday. A young woman, maybe early 20s, sitting by the window of a patient room. Her hair had been tangled, her eyes restless, but beneath the weariness lay a beauty that didn't belong in that place. She had stared at Nia with such intensity that it stopped her in her tracks. "Water," the girl had whispered, voice hoarse. Nia had brought it to her, watching as she drank slowly, like someone starved of kindness. It was then she noticed the bandage on her arm and the chart clipped at the end of the bed. Out of habit, Nia had read it. Patient admitted after a breakdown, fracture in the left wrist healing, blood type O negative. Now, sitting in the Brooks house, Nia whispered into the darkness, "Evelyn." The girl in the clinic had carried the same shade of eyes Deshawn had, sharp and searching even in weakness. And the detail that struck harder than memory itself, the blood type. Nia had helped sort the Brooks family's medications earlier that day and had seen Evelyn's old medical card in a file by accident. O negative, the rarest type. Coincidence? Nia's stomach turned. She remembered too clearly the pale scar that crossed the girl's wrist beneath the bandage. At dinner, Lorraine had spoken of Evelyn's fire, James of her temper, and Deshawn had shut the subject down with too much force. If Evelyn had truly died, why did the memory of that patient fit so perfectly? Nia closed her eyes and saw again the way the girl at the clinic had looked at her. Not like a stranger, more like someone desperate to be recognized. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, telling herself she might be wrong. Grief can twist the mind into patterns that don't exist. People resemble each other, details overlap, but the thought would not leave her. What if Evelyn Brooks hadn't died? What if she had been hidden away? The hallway outside creaked faintly, pulling her from her spiral. She sat up, listening. The sound faded. The house returned to silence, but Nia's heart refused to slow. She pressed the photograph of her father to her chest, whispering as if to him, "If you sent me here, it's because I'm meant to see the truth." Her eyes finally closed, but her mind remained restless. And in her restless half-sleep she dreamed again of the clinic window and the girl whose stare begged for help. The next afternoon the Brooks house shifted. Staff moved faster, voices stayed lower, and every clock seemed louder. Nia felt it the moment she carried fresh water to Elder James's room. Something was different, a current of unease running beneath the polished calm. When she asked the servant what was happening, he only muttered, "Business guests," before slipping away. She learned what that meant when the black sedan rolled through the gates. 2 men stepped out, both dressed in suits that looked expensive yet carried the weight of men who didn't buy style. They bought intimidation. The taller one moved with a slow confidence, his smile wide but never warm. That was Marcus Green. Beside him, Tyrone Hayes carried his bulk like a threat, shoulders squared, his eyes sharp and restless. Nia caught a glimpse of them as she passed through the hallway, her tray steady though her pulse wasn't. Their laughter carried too easily, filling the air with a kind of force that turned the house smaller. She ducked into the study to deliver a folder to Deshawn and found him already waiting, his face tight, hands clasped on the desk. Marcus entered first, spreading his arms as if he owned the room. "Deshawn, my brother, always good to see you." His voice rolled smooth, practiced. But there was a weight behind it that left no room for refusal. Tyrone followed with fewer words but more menace. "Let's not waste time. We've got a deal ready for you. Need signing." Deshawn's jaw tightened. "I told you I'd need more days to review the terms." Marcus chuckled, stepping closer, sliding a thick folder onto the desk. "Days? Time is a luxury. You know how quickly opportunities vanish. Sign it now, while the ink is still fresh. Everyone profits." Nia stood by the shelf pretending to adjust books, her presence almost invisible. Still, she couldn't stop listening. Deshawn opened the folder, his eyes scanning. She saw his knuckles whiten on the paper. Tyrone leaned forward, his tone low but cutting. "Hesitation doesn't suit you, Deshawn. We've invested too much to play patient." Marcus added, "You've got assets. We've got vision. Don't let stubborn pride cost you everything." Deshawn closed the folder slowly, meeting Marcus's eyes. "Vision without stability is a fall waiting to happen. I won't risk my family for it." Marcus's smile thinned. "Family, yes. Always the excuse, but let's be clear. If you don't step with us, you'll find the ground crumbles fast." The silence that followed pressed on Nia's chest like weight. She kept her expression blank, but her thoughts raced. These men weren't ordinary businessmen. Their pressure felt closer to threat than negotiation. Elder James's voice suddenly cut from the doorway, raspy but sharp. "If a man's hand shakes before signing, the paper ain't worth his name." He glared at Marcus, his cane planted firmly. Marcus laughed as if amused, but his eyes darkened. "Age makes a man wise, or makes him cling to ghosts. Which one are you today, James?" The old man didn't flinch. "The kind that still knows a wolf when it walks in." Tyrone smirked, muttering, "Careful, wolves bite." Deshawn stepped forward, his voice calm but hard. "This discussion ends tonight. I'll consider your proposal, but I will not be forced. You know where the door is." For a moment Marcus seemed ready to push harder, but finally he lifted his hands in mock surrender. "Fine, we'll give you space, but don't take too long. Space closes fast." The men left with the same heavy laughter that had entered with them. The air they left behind felt tainted, the study colder. Nia exhaled only when she was sure they were gone. She met Deshawn's eyes briefly, and for the first time saw something there she hadn't expected. Fear, tightly hidden beneath control. That night, while the house settled back into uneasy quiet, Nia told herself the truth she wished she hadn't learned. Marcus and Tyrone weren't just dangerous men. They were men who believed this house, and everyone in it already belonged to them. The Brooks house seemed calmer the following morning, but Nia felt the quiet was only a shell covering what had happened the night before. Marcus and Tyrone had left, yet their shadows lingered, pressing against every hallway. Deshawn spoke less, Elder James grew more irritable, and Aunt Lorraine muttered prayers under her breath as she arranged the table settings. Nia moved carefully, performing her duties, but her mind remained fixed on the look she had seen in Deshawn's eyes. Fear, wrapped in composure. Later that day, while delivering fresh linens to a guest room she had not yet entered, Nia noticed the door to an adjoining space slightly ajar. Curiosity tugged at her, and when she stepped inside, the scent of dust and old perfume told her the room had not been touched in months. A vanity stood near the wall, photographs scattered across it, and a faded sweater hung on the chair as if waiting for someone to return. She realized with a jolt that this must have been Evelyn's room. Her breath caught as she stepped closer. The bed was made, but not with the crisp precision of staff, rather with the casual neatness of a young woman who once rushed out each morning. A framed photo on the nightstand showed Evelyn smiling, her hair loose, her eyes alive, the same eyes Nia remembered from the clinic. She touched the frame gently before noticing a leather-bound notebook partly hidden beneath a stack of papers. The cover was worn, corners frayed. Nia hesitated, glancing toward the hallway, then picked it up. When she opened it, neat handwriting filled the pages. At first it was simple, lists of classes, small frustrations, lines of poetry, but as she flipped further, the tone shifted. Sentences became sharper, thoughts urgent. Evelyn had begun writing about Marcus and Tyrone. "They're circling farther like vultures," one entry read. "Promises of growth, but I see what they hide. Numbers don't lie, and theirs don't add up. Why can't he see it?" Another page carried darker words. "If I speak, I'll be distanced. They smile at me. But behind the smile is warning. I feel it. Something isn't right. I need proof before it's too late." Nia's hands trembled as she read. Every line confirmed what her instincts had whispered. These men were more than reckless partners. They were predators carving out control, and Evelyn had known it before anyone else. On one page near the end, Evelyn had scrawled in haste, "They think I don't notice, but I do. Money is vanishing, papers altered. If I tell father, they'll destroy us all. I have to hide what I've found." The sentence stopped there. The ink smudged as if she'd closed the diary too quickly. Nia shut the notebook, her heart pounding. The room around her suddenly felt alive with secrets, as if Evelyn herself were watching. She slid the diary back under the papers exactly as she had found it, then smoothed the bedspread with nervous care. As she left the room, she whispered under her breath, "You weren't wrong, Evelyn, and neither am I." That evening, while she served tea in the study, Marcus's laugh echoed in her memory, though he was nowhere near. She looked at Deshawn, who sat quietly, staring at documents on his desk. Did he know how deep his partner's schemes went? Did he suspect his daughter had uncovered the truth before her disappearance? Nia pressed the teapot steady despite her shaking hand. She had come to the Brooks house searching for survival, but what she had found was a trail of breadcrumbs left by a woman the family swore was gone. And now, whether she wanted to or not, she was part of the path Evelyn had started. The discovery of the diary burned in Nia's thoughts long after she had slipped it back under the papers. Each step through the Brooks house felt heavier, as though every corner carried eyes waiting to see if she had uncovered something forbidden. She moved carefully, but the weight of what she'd read demanded release. She needed someone she could trust, someone who wouldn't dismiss her instincts as grief or imagination. That night, in the small hours when the house was finally quiet, she took out her old phone, the one she'd barely used since losing her job. Most contacts had drifted away, but one name remained, familiar and steady, Ebony Fields. Once her colleague at the hospital, Ebony had been the kind of woman who noticed details no one else did. If anyone could help her make sense of this, it was her. I hesitated before pressing the call button. When the line finally clicked and a groggy voice answered, relief swept through her. "Nia? Lord, it's been forever. Where have you been?" Her voice broke with emotion she hadn't meant to show. "I'm at the Brooks house. My father sent me here before he passed. Ebony, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth." There was a pause, then Ebony's tone sharpened. "What happened?" Nia lowered her voice, glancing towards the door as though the walls could hear. "Do you remember that night at the clinic months back? There was a girl in the psych ward, young, light brown skin, dark hair, broken wrist. She looked like someone who shouldn't have been there." Ebony inhaled sharply. "You mean the one who kept asking if her father was coming? I remember. She was scared, Nia. Real scared." Nia pressed the phone closer, her heart pounding. "What do you remember about her?" "She told me once her name was Evie. Whispered it like a secret. At the time, I thought it was just another alias patients use. But she said it like it meant something. You think that was Evelyn Brooks?" Nia closed her eyes. "I've seen her pictures here. It was her, Ebony. I'm sure of it. They said she's dead, but she isn't. She was hidden, locked away. And now, I don't know where she is." Ebony's voice dropped, serious now. "Listen to me. If that girl was Evelyn, then someone powerful wanted her out of the way. You don't keep a daughter in a clinic unless you're trying to bury her without a grave. Be careful. You're walking on dangerous ground." "I can't walk away," Nia whispered. Her diary proves she knew something. Marcus and Tyrone, they're not just bad partners. They're stealing Ebony. Maybe worse. Evelyn found out and they silenced her. If she's still alive, she needs someone. Ebony hesitated, then answered with the conviction Nia had been waiting for. Then you're not alone anymore. I'll dig into records, patient transfers, admissions with fake names. I've got contacts who owe me favours. If she was moved, we'll find a trace. Nia felt her chest loosen with gratitude. Thank you. I can't do this by myself. You won't have to, Ebony replied firmly. But don't trust anyone in that house. Not until you know who stands where. The line went quiet after they said their goodbyes, but Nia sat staring at the screen long after the call ended. For the first time since entering the Brooks estate, she didn't feel completely isolated. She had a witness, someone who had seen Evelyn with her own eyes, someone who could help her pull the threads together. She lay back, exhaustion tugging at her, but determination burning stronger than fear. The Brooks house still held secrets, and the men circling it weren't about to stop. Yet now, Nia wasn't fighting shadows alone. Rain threatened that evening, clouds pressing low against the estate, and the air inside felt even heavier than usual. Nia carried tea into Elder James's room and found him staring at a folded map spread across his lap. His cane rested nearby, his blanket sliding toward the floor. She bent to adjust it, but his hand stopped her. You see this? He asked, tapping the map with a gnarled finger. His eyes gleamed, sharper than they had in days. Nia frowned. What is it? Places my son doesn't think I remember, James muttered. Old properties, land deals from years back. Marcus thought I wasn't paying attention, but I was. He's got a house out there, far from here, too far for casual outdoor visits. Men like him don't hide cabins in the woods for leisure. They hide people. The words sent a chill through her. She pulled a chair closer. Where exactly? Before he could answer, the door opened, and Victor stepped in, carrying a tray. Tall, lean, always quiet. Victor was more than a servant. He had been Deshawn's right hand for years. His gaze moved from the map to Nia. You shouldn't be discussing this, he said softly, though his eyes betrayed no anger, only concern. James snorted. Boy, I've lived too long to be told when to shut up. She needs to know. She's the only one in this house with the courage to face the truth. Victor set the tray down, then approached the chair. He lowered his voice, glancing at the door. The old man isn't wrong. I've seen records, travel logs. Marcus disappears to that place often. Too often. If Evelyn was hidden anywhere, it could be there. Nia's heart thudded. The memory of Evelyn's eyes from the clinic flashed again. Then we have to go, she said quickly. Victor's expression hardened. It's not that simple. Marcus keeps guards there. He doesn't trust anyone. Walking in unprepared is suicide. James leaned back, coughing, but managed a dry smile. Every fortress has a crack. Marcus may think himself clever, but he always underestimates women. That's where you come in. Nia looked at them both, her pulse racing. She was a caretaker, not a spy. But the idea of Evelyn locked away somewhere in that hidden house lit a fire she couldn't ignore. Show me on the map, she said. Victor hesitated before drawing a circle around a wooded area far beyond the main roads. Here, it looks like nothing more than a hunting lodge, but I've seen supply orders delivered there, things no hunting trip would require. James rasped. Food, medicine, and locks. Nia pressed her palm against the map, her voice steady. Then that's where she is. I can't sit here and pretend otherwise. Victor studied her, then nodded slowly. If we move carefully. I'll prepare a vehicle. Tonight's storm will cover our tracks. But once we go, there's no guarantee we'll make it back easily. The old man chuckled, coughing again. I've got one foot in the grave already. Better to use the other to kick down a door before I go. Nia managed a faint smile despite the weight in her chest. Then we go tonight. Victor folded the map quickly, tucking it under his arm before anyone else could see. Nia helped James settle back, though his eyes still glowed with stubborn fire. The decision was made. Later, as she returned to her room to pack the few things she owned, her hand shook, but her resolve did not. Somewhere in that forested hideout Marcus had built, Evelyn's fate waited. And for the first time, Nia felt the lines of her life shift towards something greater than survival. She was no longer just a guest in the Brooks house. She was a participant in a fight that had already claimed too many silences. The storm came just as Victor predicted. Sheets of rain pounded against the windshield, hiding their vehicle as it crept down a narrow road carved through thick woods. Branches bent in the wind, and every flash of lightning lit the sky with a raw, merciless glow. Nia sat in the back, her bag on her lap, her hands clenched around a small vial of crushed tablets Victor had given her. Sleep medicine, strong fast, enough to drop a guard without raising suspicion. Elder James had insisted on coming, but his health made that impossible. Before they left, he had grasped Nia's hand with surprising strength. "Bring her back," he said. "Prove the truth matters." His words stayed with her, sharper than the thunder outside. When the headlights finally caught sight of the cabin, Nia felt her stomach knot. It looked almost ordinary. Wood walls, a porch, a chimney. But the chain-link fence around it and the two men standing under the porch light proved it was no weekend retreat. Their rifles leaned casually against the railing, but their eyes scanned the storm like predators who knew danger could walk on two legs. Victor killed the engine and whispered, "We'll wait until the shift changes. 1/2 hour, then you move." Nia's throat was dry. "Me? You're the only one they don't expect. If anyone can get inside without raising alarm, it's you." She pressed the vial tighter in her palm. "And if I fail?" Victor looked at her, rain dripping from his brow. "Then Evelyn stays in there forever." The minutes dragged like hours. Finally, one guard left the porch, muttering as he headed toward a small shed. The other leaned inside, pouring himself coffee from a thermos. Victor touched Nia's shoulder. "Now!" She slipped from the car, the storm swallowing her footsteps. Her blouse clung to her skin, her hair heavy with rain, but she moved fast, staying close to the trees until she reached the side of the fence. Victor had cut it earlier, the opening waited like a mouth. She crawled through, knees sinking into wet earth, and pressed herself against the cabin wall. Through the window she saw it. A dim lamp, a small bed, and on it a figure curled under a thin blanket. Nia's chest clenched. Evelyn. Even in shadow she recognized the outline of her face, the same eyes from the clinic, now closed in exhausted sleep. But between them stood the last barrier, the guard inside. He sat at a table sipping coffee, his rifle leaning within reach. Nia forced herself to breathe evenly as she pulled the vial from her pocket. She crept to the back door, heart hammering, and pushed it open just enough to slip inside. The guard glanced up, startled, but before he could react she spoke quickly, her tone calm. "Storm knocked a branch on the roof. Thought you'd want to know." She held the empty mug she'd picked up outside, casual in her movements. "Mind if I warm up with you?" He grunted, suspicious, but waved her in. "Storm's brutal. Sit down, don't wander." She moved carefully, her fingers brushing the edge of his thermos as if by accident. With practiced subtlety, she tipped the crushed tablets into his cup while his back turned toward the door. He poured himself another drink without noticing. Nia watched as he raised it, swallowed, and leaned back with a satisfied sigh. Minutes passed like years. His words slowed, his eyes heavy. "Damn storm makes me tired," he muttered. Then his head dropped forward, and the rifle slipped from his grasp onto the floor with a dull thud. Nia froze, listening. No one came. The storm had swallowed the sound. She rushed to Evelyn's side, touching her shoulder gently. "Evelyn, it's me. You're safe now." The young woman stirred, her face pale, eyes opening slowly. Recognition flickered. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I knew, someone would come." Nia's throat tightened, but there was no time for comfort. She pulled the blanket around Evelyn and helped her sit up. Outside, the storm raged louder, masking their every move. For the first time since she stepped into the Brooks house, Nia felt something shift, proof that the truth had survived, fragile but breathing. The cabin door groaned as Nia pushed it open, Evelyn leaning heavily against her shoulder. The storm still raged, wind tearing branches loose, rain falling in blinding sheets. Victor appeared from the tree line, signaling urgently with his hand. "Move now!" he shouted over the thunder, but the sound of the fallen rifle inside must have carried farther than they thought. A flashlight beam cut through the storm from the shed. Another guard, broader and faster, stormed across the mud with a pistol drawn. "Hey, stop!" Nia's pulse exploded. Victor rushed forward, intercepting him, but the man raised the pistol. The crack of a gunshot split the storm, echoing through the trees. Nia flinched, dragging Evelyn closer to the car, but Victor twisted the guard's arm, sending the shot wild into the night sky. They struggled violently, boots sliding in the mud. Evelyn whimpered, her legs buckling. "I can't," Nia gritted her teeth. "You can. Just a little further." Another figure appeared from the porch, Another guard, rifle in hand. For a moment it felt like everything was lost, but then headlights flared from the road. Victor had left the car angled for a quick escape, and its glare blinded the guard long enough for him to stumble. Victor seized the moment, landing a brutal strike that sent the pistol flying. "Get her in the car," he shouted. Nia half-carried, half-dragged Evelyn, her clothes soaked, her body fragile as glass. She pushed her into the back seat just as Victor leapt in behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, tyres tearing against the mud. Bullets cracked behind them, one shattering the rear window, spraying glass across the seat. Evelyn screamed, curling against Nia's chest. "Hold on," Victor growled, swerving onto the forest road. Branches whipped against the sides, the storm cloaking their flight. The guards' shouts faded behind them, but the danger did not. Every bend of the road could hide another trap, another chase. Nia held Evelyn close, whispering, "You're safe now. You're safe." But her own hands trembled, the sting of broken glass cutting her palms. Evelyn's breathing was shallow, her weight frighteningly light. Hours passed like a blur of headlights and thunder until the storm finally broke near dawn. By the time they reached the Brooks estate, the sky was pale grey, the air thick with silence. Victor slammed the car to a stop near the steps, and Deshawn was already waiting at the door, his suit dishevelled, his face drawn with exhaustion. When he saw Evelyn, his entire body froze. For a second he didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, with a strangled cry, he rushed forward. "My baby!" Nia tried to steady Evelyn, but she collapsed forward into her father's arms. Deshawn gathered her as though he could never let go again, his voice breaking as he whispered her name over and over. Elder James appeared at the top of the stairs, his cane trembling in his hand, his eyes wide with disbelief. Tears filled them, rolling freely down the grooves of his face. "Lord have mercy," he whispered. "She's alive." Deshawn carried Evelyn into the house, laying her gently on the couch, his hands trembling as he stroked her hair. Evelyn lifted her weak gaze, her lips barely forming the words, "I knew you'd find me." Nia stood back, chest heaving, glass still glittering in her hair. She watched as father, daughter, and grandfather clung to one another, their sobs mixing with laughter that sounded almost unreal. For the first time, the Brooks house echoed not with secrets or threats, but with the raw, undeniable sound of reunion. And yet, as Nia wiped blood from her palms, she knew this was not the end. The men who had locked Evelyn away would not accept defeat. Their silence tonight would soon turn into vengeance. The Brooks house no longer felt the same. Sunlight filtered through its tall windows differently now, brighter, freer, carrying laughter that had been buried for too many years. Yet beneath the warmth lay the steady hum of preparation. Papers piled onto Sean's desk, phones rang more often, and the quiet conversations with Victor no longer carried the calm of business. They carried the sharpness of war. Evelyn rested upstairs, her strength slowly returning. Doctors came discreetly, their visits arranged by Victor to avoid unwanted attention. Each time they left, they confirmed the same truth. She was weak, but alive, and with care she would recover. Elder James spent his hours by her side, holding her hand as though letting go even for a moment might take her from him again. Aunt Lorraine hovered in silence, her sharp tongue softened by the sight of a miracle she hadn't expected. Deshawn, however, had no time for softness. In his study, he stood over a stack of documents, Evelyn's diary lying open beside them. Nia entered quietly with fresh tea, but he barely looked up. His voice was low, controlled, but fire burned in it. "They locked my daughter away, stole from me, threatened my family. No more." She set the tray down, her eyes meeting his. "What will you do?" His gaze didn't waver. "Fight them. In the open. The police are already listening. I've given them names, dates, transfers. Victor has more records. With Evelyn's testimony, Marcus and Tyrone will have nowhere to hide." Nia felt the weight of his words. It wasn't just a fight for business, it was a fight for survival. Men like Marcus and Tyrone didn't surrender quietly. She hesitated, then said softly, "They won't forgive. They'll come back." Deshawn finally looked at her, his jaw tight but his eyes softer. "Then let them come. I won't live in fear anymore, and I won't let them take her again." Later that evening, Nia climbed the stairs and paused outside Evelyn's room. She heard quiet laughter inside, Evelyn teasing her grandfather about his stubbornness, James answering with a gruff chuckle. It was the sound of life returning, fragile but real. Nia leaned against the wall, tears pricking her eyes. For the first time in months, she felt she belonged. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Ebony. Records confirm multiple hidden transfers. You were right. I'll keep digging. Relief mixed with dread in Nia's chest. The truth was spilling out, but with every truth came new danger. That night, when the house finally quieted, Deshawn joined his father and daughter in the living room. They sat together, no titles, no walls, just family. Nia watched from a distance, her chest aching with gratitude and fear. Evelyn lay with her head against her father's shoulder, James's hand resting on hers. Their tears mingled with smiles that seemed almost impossible after everything. Nia turned away slightly, giving them privacy, but Deshawn's voice called her back. You're part of this now. My father trusted you. My daughter owes you her freedom. Your family, Nia. Her throat tightened. For so long she had carried only loss. Yet now, in this house once filled with shadows, she had found something unexpected. A place, a bond, a reason to stay. But as she lay awake later, staring at the ceiling of her room, her thoughts returned to Marcus and Tyrone. Men like that didn't vanish because of police reports. They waited, they plotted, they struck when least expected. The Brooks house was no longer a prison of secrets. It was a fortress preparing for siege. Still for tonight, Nia allowed herself to breathe. She had helped bring a daughter home, given an old man peace and shown a father that truth could be stronger than fear. Tomorrow would bring battles, but tonight, for the first time, she felt what her father had wanted for her all along, a new beginning.